Core federal laws. What does RESPA stand for? Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. What is the purpose of RESPA? To ensure transparency in the real estate closing process and prohibit kickbacks. What does TILA stand for? Truth in Lending Act. What is the purpose of TILA? To disclose the true cost of credit to consumers. What is Regulation Z? A TILA provision that requires disclosure of APR and loan terms. What does ECOA stand for? Equal Credit Opportunity Act. What is the purpose of ECOA? To prohibit discrimination in lending. What does FCRA stand for? Fair Credit Reporting Act. What is the purpose of FCRA? To protect the accuracy and privacy of consumer credit information. What does HMDA stand for? Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. What is the purpose of HMDA? To detect discriminatory lending patterns. What does the SAFE Act stand for? Secure and Fair Enforcement for Mortgage Licensing Act. What is the purpose of the SAFE Act? To require licensing and registration of mortgage loan originators. What is the Fair Housing Act? A law that prohibits housing discrimination based on protected classes. What does the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, prohibit? Discrimination based on disability in housing and public accommodations. What is the purpose of the Civil Rights Act of 1866? To prohibit racial discrimination in property transactions. What is the Truth in Lending Disclosure? A document that outlines loan terms, APR, and total cost of credit. What does the Community Reinvestment Act, CRA, do? Encourages banks to help meet credit needs of low-income areas. What does the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act protect? The privacy of consumers' financial information. What does the Do Not Call Act regulate? Telemarketing and cold calls by real estate professionals. What law requires the loan estimate and closing disclosure? TILA-RESPA Integrated Disclosure, TRID, rule. What is redlining? The illegal practice of denying loans based on neighborhood demographics. What is blockbusting? Persuading owners to sell based on fear of demographic change. What is steering? Directing buyers to or away from areas based on protected classes. What is the purpose of antitrust laws? To prohibit price fixing and anti-competitive practices. What law limits unsolicited faxes in real estate marketing? The Junk Fax Prevention Act. What is the CAN-SPAM Act? Regulates commercial email marketing. What is the TCPA, Telephone Consumer Protection Act? Limits telemarketing calls and autodialing. What is the role of the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act, UETA? Gives legal effect to electronic signatures in contracts. What is the eSign Act? Federal law validating electronic signatures in real estate transactions. Federal agencies. What is HUD? Department of Housing and Urban Development, oversees housing laws. What does FHA stand for? Federal Housing Administration, insures residential loans. What is the VA? Department of Veterans Affairs, guarantees loans for eligible veterans. What is the USDA? U.S. Department of Agriculture, provides rural housing loans. What is the CFPB? Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, enforces finance-related laws like TILA and RESPA. What is the FHFA? Federal Housing Finance Agency, regulates Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. What is Fannie Mae, FNMA? Government-sponsored enterprise that buys and guarantees mortgages. What is Freddie Mac, FHLMC? GSE that purchases loans from lenders to provide liquidity. What is Ginnie Mae, GNMA? Guarantees mortgage-backed securities for government-insured loans. What is the Federal Reserve's role in real estate? Sets interest rates that affect mortgage rates. What is the FDIC? Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, protects bank deposits. What is the OCC? Office of the Comptroller of the Currency regulates national banks. What is the FTC's role in real estate? Enforces truth in advertising and antitrust laws. What is the role of the Department of Justice, DOJ? Enforces antitrust laws and fair housing violations. What is the SEC's role in real estate finance? Regulates investment securities, including mortgage-backed securities. What is the NMLS? Nationwide multi-state licensing system, tracks mortgage loan originator licenses. What is the role of state real estate commissions? License, regulate, and discipline real estate professionals. What is the function of a housing finance agency, HFA? Provides affordable housing and down payment assistance. What does the Department of Treasury do in housing? Administers programs like Making Home Affordable. What does the Federal Home Loan Bank System, FHLB, do? Provides liquidity to financial institutions for housing finance. State and local laws/licensing. What is a real estate license law? A state law that regulates the practice of real estate. Who enforces state license laws? The State Real Estate Commission or Department. What is required to maintain a salesperson license? Continuing education and license renewal. What happens if a licensee violates license law? They may face fines, suspension, or revocation. What is the Real Estate Recovery Fund? A state fund that compensates victims of licensee misconduct. What is the statute of frauds in real estate? Requires contracts for real property to be in writing. What is the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC? Governs sale of personal property, not real estate directly. What are zoning laws? Local regulations on land use. What is eminent domain? The government's power to take private property for public use with compensation. What is police power? The state's authority to regulate for public health and safety. Practical applications. What is the purpose of the Do Not Call registry? To protect consumers from unwanted telemarketing calls. What must licensees disclose under fair housing laws? That discrimination is prohibited in housing transactions. Can licensees deny service based on credit score? Only if consistent and not discriminatory. What happens if a licensee violates fair housing laws? Civil penalties, license suspension, or federal fines. Who handles complaints about mortgage fraud? FBI, HUD, and the State Real Estate Board. What is the penalty for RESPA violations? Up to $10,000 and/or 1 year in prison. How are advertising violations penalized? Fines, suspension, or revocation by the State Commission. Who enforces the ADA? U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ. What are steering and blockbusting examples of fair housing violations? What is a protected class under fair housing? Race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, and familial status. Can real estate ads include no kids? No, it violates fair housing laws. What is the role of HUD in fair housing? Enforces complaints and investigates violations. Are verbal offers enforceable in real estate? No, must be in writing per the statute of frauds. Can licensees write legal contracts? Only fill in blanks of pre-approved forms, not give legal advice. Can a licensee discriminate based on criminal history? Only if it's a legitimate business reason, not arbitrary. Are occupancy limits a fair housing violation? Not if based on legitimate health and safety standards. Can a licensee recommend a specific lender? Yes, but cannot receive undisclosed compensation, RESPA. What agency enforces advertising in real estate? FTC and state commissions. What's the penalty for practicing without a license? Criminal charges and civil penalties. What is a dual agency disclosure? A written agreement showing both buyer and seller are represented.